Okay, we are good to go.
Thank you, Jacob. Mayor, Council, welcome to the fiscal year 2022 budget presentation kickoff. This would normally be considered the budget showcase. However, since we're not in person and we don't have a lot of showcase type items, today is effectively going to be the financial condition report and giving you a little bit of background information leading into the budget workshops that will start up next week. What I'd like to do is first start off by giving you a little bit of overview of the budget documents that you all should have received this past week or the week before. The first is with regards to some structural changes that we've started to make in the document itself. We are trying to create standardization across all the different departments in terms of how the information is presented and the sequence in which that information is presented. So you may notice as you compare the 2022 budget to 21 and or 20 in the past, you'll start to see there's some changes in terms of the physical layout within the departments. The second is with regards to the strategic plan. Prior to the start of this year's budget cycle, we had done an internal exercise where we created priorities, goals, and initiatives based on the community conversations. And you will see that within each of the departments, there are action items that the departments will be embarking on for this upcoming year that are aligned back to what's referred to as PGIs. In the administrative section, you'll see that there is a caveat that says those PGIs are subject to change based on the adoption of a strategic plan and the adoption of our new structural model. The reason for doing something in this year's budget was to get the departments to start thinking about the budget from a perspective of alignment and to start actually incorporating it within our document. You'll also notice that as you compare department to department, the presentation of their action items in reference to those PGIs are all a little bit different. One of the reasons for doing that is we would like feedback from the elected officials as to which format you prefer to see going forward so that we can standardize the format across all departments. So some great examples, if you do a comparison of the police department to public works, you'll notice two distinct methodologies of action item presentation, goals and action items. We'd be looking for you to tell us which ones you like, which ones you don't like, so we can hopefully come to a happy medium on our format going forward. The next is with regards to department presentations. Normally at the budget showcase, we would have a handful of departments doing some big ticket item presentations for you. Since we're not in person, we're not going to do that in this format this year. We don't have vehicles for you to come out and see. We don't have segways for you to hop on. Our goal is to get back to more of a field tour type showcase. Hopefully next year we'll be doing an in-person financial presentation and then doing a short tour of improvements out in the field. But one of the things I'd like to do is get the departments more into the habit of doing the presentations on big ticket items or big changes to their budget within their section of the budget workshops as we move forward with the budget review. So when we get to the end of the financial overview today, one of the things we'll do is review a list of bullet points by department that will give you an idea of what the departments will be talking about when we get to the actual workshops for each individual department. Those will you're basically going to see what is the table of contents for the presentation as we do the workshops with council. So with that, if there aren't any questions up front, we'll go ahead and start. Are there any questions? And we will dive in. Let's hope this works correctly. Are you all seeing the 2022 budget official financial condition report slide? No. Still no? Okay. Oh, that didn't, now can you see it? Well, I can't see you now, so that's not good.
We do see it now, Mike.
And all right, and I can see you all up in the corner over here to some extent.
Slide the bar.
Have it on gallery view and slide the bar so your
Okay,
presentation's smaller.
I think we're good to go. All right, so you can all see the first slide. So this will be the financial condition report. For the new council members, you don't have a point of comparison, so don't worry about it. So the first thing we want to discuss with you is what is sound financial condition? And a lot of people may take a very static view of our financials, and we do not. We look at our fiscal sustainability over a long period of time to determine how we're doing as a city. We don't evaluate the budget year to year. We do consider the impacts of the decisions we make today and how that might impact us 5 or more years down the road. As a comparison, if you wanted to think about it like your house, you may own a house, but you recognize at some point in the future, you're going to need to replace the roof. You're going to need to replace your HVAC system. You may have to do another coat of paint, plumbing systems, electrical systems, etc. You need to anticipate them and prepare for them. So every decision we make, we have that forward-looking thought in the back of our mind. Long-term financial obligations. I can't take credit for this. The city has done an excellent job since before I ever got here of getting to a point of no debt. The debt was actually retired just a little bit ago with the last of our infrastructure debt being retired. So we have no borrowing at this point in time. We do have, in terms of long-term financial obligations, pension costs. Those go on forever until there are no members left in the plan. Even though we got out of the fire department business a couple of years ago, we are still responsible for the pension plan. And even though our financial obligation may get paid off in the next 8 years or so with the agreement that we have with the city of Jacksonville, the plan must stay up and running until all of the existing members are no longer in the plan. And that will likely be 30, 40, 50 years down the road before that plan is retired. The last is infrastructure maintenance and replacement. As many of you know, we go out and we construct a road, build a lift station, put pipes in the ground. We are obligated to repair, operate, and maintain that infrastructure going forward until some point in time where we change it. So that's just to give you a little bit of the long-term financial obligations. Our approach here at the city is actually pretty consistent with what a lot of other municipalities and local government agencies do across the state. We try to do projections for 5-year revenue and expenditures across the board. One of the things I can tell you that I learned from a previous CFO is that everything that you see from year 1 and beyond is all wrong. They're projections, they're guesses. We honestly don't know what will happen in terms of revenues in 2023, 24, 25, 26, etc. They are our best guess based on trends that we see in the societal environment around us. We always try to look for potential issues before they actually affect the city and make sure that we can make adjustments before they actually impact us. I think as some of you may have seen from participating in Florida League of Cities, there's always legislation that hangs out there. At any point in time, by the snap of a finger, we may see that we're losing our communication services tax, or we're capped on what we can do with utility taxes. Those are just a couple examples, but we try to stay ahead of those types of issues. And when we do see that an issue is going to affect us, we always try to either propose adjustments in the level of service that we provide or try to find additional revenue to maintain the level of service that we're providing to the community. Just to go over a few of the assumptions that we reviewed with you back in May, we are proposing to hold the millage rate stable again at 39447. We are not proposing any new debt for the city in the fiscal year 2022 budget, and the utility rates would be adjusted in accordance with adopted rate resolutions. Pretty straightforward. Budgeting in uncertain times, and I think you'll all appreciate this, but in reviewing the slide deck this morning, I was tempted to make some adjustments to the slides based on issues that have just happened over the past 7 to 10 days with the Delta variant starting to increase dramatically. And I said, no, leave the slides alone, because again, we're not sure where we will be even 2 weeks from now, let alone a year from now. So the budget process began back in January of 2021. Since that time, the COVID-19 vaccines are now widely available to anyone over the age of 12. People have their choice of vaccines that they would like to get. Day-to-day life for many citizens and organizations are somewhat back to normal. I think if you've watched the news just over this past week, you've seen in some locations where mask mandates are coming back into effect. There are some communities that are looking at potentially more drastic responses to what's going on. So it's very fluid. And I think the fluidity of this event also goes to the uncertainty and the risks that are associated with developing the budget. The good news is our financial outlook for fiscal year 22 has improved based on the numbers that we've seen and how they've come in over the past several months. That's allowing us to make investments, very targeted investments in both infrastructure and personnel that we think will better position the city for fiscal year 2022 and beyond. But again, where we will be 3 months from now, I can't speak to that. Here's a quick summary of what we're seeing with regards to revenues. Moderate growth in our property tax revenues. They're up 4% from last year. The other revenues that come from consumer spending is a little bit more subjective. We're still seeing a lot of uncertainty. So again, just as a quick summary, based on the risks that we see out there and the revenues that we're seeing, we think we're able to add some staff in critical areas. We're going to continue to maintain our current levels of service to the community, and we will also be able to make significant capital improvements. And that's one of the things that I know when I got here was high on the council's radar, that you all wanted to see the capital project backlog start moving. And I think we actually have that starting to move pretty good now. We'll go through a handful of budget highlights. The first is no change in the millage rate. The general fund revenues are up 4.8% from fiscal year 21. Our millage rate continues to be lower than the statewide average. While that's a good number, we also need to remember that it's based on property valuations and the revenue that you collect per mill, but overall it's still a good place to be. Our budget in total is actually up 8.6% from the current fiscal year. We're up to a $179 million budget. A large portion of that is with regards to expenditures on capital projects. And again, that's a good thing because it means we're investing in and maintaining our infrastructure out in the field. The general fund budget comes in at just under $25 million, which again is 4.8% higher than the current fiscal year. We're proposing to maintain our debt-free status. The electric rates have been reduced by $28 per 1,000 kilowatt hours since 2010, still a good trend to be maintaining. And our garbage and stormwater rates have not been raised in 25 years. We put an asterisk next to that last statement for the reason that for stormwater rates, at some point in the near future, we will be completing a stormwater audit of our system. When we do, there may be some unidentified needs that we need to address that may or may not result in a change to our stormwater rate structure. Garbage is another one where we've been having some issue with regards to service provision. We are approximately 18 months away from the end of the contract that we're currently in. Depending on whether or not we renew with the current provider or go out on the street, we may or may not have an impact to the rates that are within that. That would ultimately be the 23 budget, but we wanted to flag that now based on the fact that we're forward looking to a year and a half out. Pensions is one we wanted to talk a little bit about because you'll see it graphically in just a few slides. But there's a one-time credit of accumulated excess funds in the police and fire pension plans. That's resulting in an unexpectedly low contribution for this upcoming year. What that means is for fiscal year 2023, the benchmark will be artificially low and it will look like a very high increase for 23. And again, we ask that you look at it over a longer period of time, not just what's happening from year to year. That is just a 1 year impact, but it will make it look exaggerated in the second year, which is 23. With regards to wages, we do have both FOP and LIUNA negotiations, which will occur in fiscal year 2022. So our job will be to make sure that we manage costs for the non-represented employees as well as any future pay plan adjustments. But we will see where we're at when we start those negotiation processes and where we're trying to target to be going forward. We do have a few other areas of concern. The first is the sunsetting of infrastructure surtax. Again, this is well out on the horizon. It's 8 years away, but ultimately that is a source of revenue to the city that will go away at some point in time. As we start getting a little bit closer, possibly 6 to 5 years out, we'll start having conversations with the elected officials of how we want to address that situation. I'll leave it at that. Unfunded mandates and negative impacts of future state legislative actions will have an impact on us. Again, for the Finance and Taxation Subcommittee this year, Fernando, I think you've got a good idea of the fact that this legislation comes out of nowhere and threatens revenue streams coming to local government agencies. We did have the impact of Senate Bill 64, which was passed this year. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That's the elimination of surface water discharges from pollution control plants. And our deferred maintenance on city assets. We are still in the process of doing our infrastructure evaluations and our asset evaluations and developing plans to make sure we maintain them all on an appropriate schedule of both maintenance and replacement. Some of the things that are in process, we still have hanging out there the possible reduction of the tax increment financing in the south end from 95 to 50%. I think as we've discussed with council, that's roughly a $700,000 a year impact to the general fund from a revenue stream perspective. And then again, prioritizing the maintenance of our existing assets. So now we'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about the general fund. General fund is the city's primary operating fund. It is also the one that has the least number of restrictions associated with it. We can use general fund to pay salaries. We can use general fund to pay for trees. We can pay for general fund to buy equipment for recreation and parks. We cannot do any of what I just listed with money from Beaches Energy. We can't do that from water and sewer fund. Those are enterprise funds and their uses are restricted. And while we do have administrative transfers from our utility funds, it's not quite the same. So within our general fund, again, this is a little bit more of a graphic representation of where we sit with regards to our millage rate for some comparisons of other commensurate or comparable sized cities. You'll see that we're sitting pretty good at 3.9947. Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach are a little below us in the low threes. And some communities such as Fort Pierce and St. Augustine are as high as 6.9 and 7.5. So overall, we feel our millage is still very competitive in comparison to other communities. Statewide average is 4.9, and that's the white bar that you see in the middle. Another thing we like to discuss with council, as well as for the public that's watching this, is what happens with your property tax dollars. A lot of people think that when they pay their tax bill on an annual basis, that it all goes to their local government, and that's not the case. What we've done here is basically identify the taxing agencies that are located on the trim notices and the tax bills that people receive. And you'll see that there's Inland Navigation, Duval County School Board, Water Management District, and City of Jacksonville. So for the median home assessed value of just about $250,000, that's with exemptions or other Save Our Homes applications. The average tax bill comes in at a little under $4,000. Of that, the city of Jacksonville Beach is receiving just about $800 worth of tax revenue. The rest is going to those other agencies. This is a graphic representation, so you can actually see the percentage, but Jacksonville Beach only collects about 21% of the total tax bill that property owners pay. So again, city of Jacksonville, which is the county portion of the tax bill, is the largest share at 43%. Duval County School Board is right behind them at 34%. Those two agencies alone make up 3/4 of the tax bill of property owners and businesses within our community. This chart's been used for a number of years to show you the change in our assessed value across the community. You'll note that in 2006, prior to the Great Recession, we were in the high 2.7 billion range, so to speak, for valuation citywide, peaking at about 3.2, before dropping to a low of 2.47 billion in 2012. And you'll notice that between 2008 and 2016-17, there was about an 8 or 9 year window before the city got back to a point of the valuation equating where it had been at its peak in 2008. So during that time frame is where the city organization had to make cuts with regards to level of service in order to match the revenues that were coming into the city. Since the 2017-18 timeframe, you can see that we've had some fairly consistent growth, and the valuation, the taxable property value for the city is now coming in at $4.25 billion. So again, this is a chart that we think is very powerful to show the impact of a long-lasting recession, such as the one we endured 28 through 2012 at the worst, and then 2012 through 2017, where it took 5 years to pull back out of that dip. One of the conversations that's normally held at local government agencies, and again, there's no rhyme or reason to it, is can you pay for your core public safety services with the property taxes that you generate within your community? Some people would say it's a goal to try and achieve. Others would say it's a rule of thumb to at least try to get close to that number. But again, it's something that we've been doing as a comparison here for some time. The first chart that you see shows the police department and the fire department if the service had remained in-house in terms of expenditures versus revenues. And you can see that based on the projected expenditures for the fire department when it was in-house, coupled with police, there would still roughly be a $2 million gap between property taxes collected and what we would spend on core public services. Oops. The second slide shows what happens with contracted fire services, which is represented by the purple top on the last 3 bars that you see. While not at 100%, we are very close now to having property taxes equal to what we spend on police and fire services for the community. We're actually within 1% or so of what that actual number is. So does it mean everything? No, but is it actually a good place to be? Absolutely. Next thing we want to talk a little bit about is our general fund, where the money comes from. As we said a little bit earlier on in the presentation, the property taxes for the city make up the majority of revenues coming into the general fund. You'll see that the ad valorem taxes at the bottom of the pie chart, which is property taxes, make up 53% of the total pot of money for the general fund. And you may recall that general fund was just about $25 million for the upcoming budget year. All the others are relatively smaller percentages. Transfer from other funds, which is those transfer from our enterprise funds, come in at 17%. The state share and other governments is another 17%. And that's where we've got some question marks as to what those revenues will be coming in from the state. Licenses, permits, forfeitures, interest, taxes, communications, and other type fees make up the balance, the last 13 or so percent. This next pie chart shows where the money goes. And you'll see that the police and fire make up 62% of the total expenditures for the general fund revenues. From there, the percentages get smaller, but it covers everything from insurance all the way down to a section of public works that isn't covered by water and sewer. Again, that general fund has a lot of versatility with regards to how it can be spent. The next slide is again a graphic representation of our pension contributions. We wanted to make sure that you could graphically see the dip that we're seeing in fiscal year 22 for that one-time reduction. So you'll see that in 21, we were peaking at just about $3.9 million. This year, based on both market performance and the accumulated excess funds of about $200,000, it's driving that contribution down to about 3.5. Next year, depending on market returns and whether or not we see an increase in our contribution, it may look like a dramatic contribution, but you probably have to look at it from a projection across multiple years rather than just by looking at it year to year. We just wanted to make sure you were all aware of that. Next, we'll talk a little bit about utilities. Out of sight, out of mind is a little bit of the thought process that goes along with it. Most people don't see sewer lines, they don't see water lines, they don't understand stormwater systems. Even a lot of the electrical system and gas lines are all underground as well. But those lines and those systems all need to be inspected, maintained, and on occasion replaced in order to make sure that we can continue to provide the services. This slide gives you an idea of the changes in enterprise fund expenses for fiscal year 22. While they're modest in some of the elements, you'll see that stormwater in particular is showing a 31% change. That is directly attributable to capital projects that are coming up in fiscal year 2022 for Public Works to execute on. And you can probably hear a little bit more or dive a little bit deeper into the details once we get to the workshop for the Public Works budget. But overall, the total budget across the utilities is $112 million out of our $170+ million budget. Areas of concern with regards to our utilities, we actually have several. The first is cost of increasing federal and state regulations for water, sewer, and stormwater. I mentioned a little bit earlier Senate Bill 64. For those of you that have been paying attention to that one and some of the information we've talked about, that's eliminating surface water discharges. Right now, our pollution control plant has effluent that gets pumped to the north, combines with Neptune Beach's effluent, continues to get pumped to the north, joins with Atlantic Beach's effluent, and then gets discharged into an estuary system that goes out by Mayport into the St. Johns River. Initial review of the new state statute of Senate Bill 64 says we have a 10-year window to eliminate our surface water discharge. Director Barron is now starting to have conversations with Florida Department of Environmental Protection because they're the ones tasked with implementing this rule. But in very short order, we will start coming to council and talking about possible solutions for eliminating our surface water discharge, all of which will cost money. So we'll need to be prepared to make some expenditures along that line. The next is with regards to our infrastructure maintenance and replacement. We've got roads, water, sewer, stormwater, and drainage. We will talk about those a little bit more in detail. In particular, a few years ago, we completed the roadway inventory and did pavement condition indices, where we gave a grade or a rating point to each of the road segments within our jurisdiction. Dennis and his staff are now in the process of taking a few years to cycle through those roads that were already budgeted in the CIP and clear the queue with those while taking future roads and plugging them in based on the PCI indices that were identified by the assessment. We're in the process of conducting and starting some investigations and wrapping up others related to water, sewer, and stormwater. And we will be taking the same approach with each of those utilities as well, seeing what is needed in the immediate near future and what is required in the long term to maintain all of those assets. With regards to electric systems, NERC, FERC, CERC, all have regulatory requirements that we must abide by for the provision of electric power to our community. There's also regulations for natural gas. You may be following that there are trends around the country with regards to changes in local laws and restrictions that are being passed. On the West Coast, there are multiple communities that have banned the expansion of natural gas. Here in the state of Florida, the governor signed off on Senate Bill 1128, House Bill 919, which was a preemption over restrictions on utility services. And it allowed the state of Florida to maintain a variety of fuel sources in order to be cost competitive and provide lower cost power for our community. Hopefully council had the opportunity to see the video that we sent you the other day, which was from FMPA, and Jacob Williams, their CEO, did a very good job of running down FMPA's strategic goal of 70, 60, 50. And those three numbers represent maintaining energy costs below $70 per kilowatt hour, 60 minutes of downtime or less per power customer per year, and a 50% emission reduction in the near future. It's a very good presentation, but again, we are members of FMPA along with multiple other public agencies in the state of Florida. And so it's good to see that FMPA is creating a variety of fuel sources, including solar plants within the state of Florida, and keeping our options open to provide not just green and carbon reduced emission plants, but also to make sure that we are cost competitive in providing a consistent, reliable energy across our service district. For electric, these are just some statistics for you. For the new council members, it gives you an idea of what we deal with. For electric, we have over 35,000 customers. For the public that may see this, don't forget we provide electric service to Neptune Beach and also to the Ponte Vedra area. So that's quite a few customers that we deal with. 684 miles of underground distribution and 131 miles of overhead distribution. That's quite a lot. So obviously all of the infrastructure that you see on this list needs to be maintained, replaced as necessary in order to provide reliable service to our customers. Natural gas, while it's still in our portfolio, is also a much smaller percentage. 325 customers, the majority of those being commercial enterprise. We service hotels, we service grocery stores with rotisserie kitchens, rotisserie kitchens and cookers. Ultimately, we do a pretty good amount of therms that we sell through the system. It's never been the intention of Beaches Energy to have gas distribution throughout the entire community to residential homes. But this is something that as we get the electric strategic plan behind us and can look at gas, we can make some strategic determinations with regard to that system going forward. Water and sewer, again, 10,000 water service customers, 96 miles of sewer mains, 2,000 manholes. Again, very large numbers when you look at it across the entire system. Roads are the same way. We may only be 8 square miles, but we have 93 road miles that we have to work with. That includes all of the stormwater inlets and systems that go along with that. So again, just a quick summary on the utilities. Our long-term strategy is to be a lot more proactive with how we manage those assets and how we perform operation and maintenance on them to get the maximum lifespan out of each one. The PCI is being implemented right now, and it will take a couple of years to go through that cycle. The Beaches Energy strategic plan is in its final phase of being wrapped up, but you'll notice when we get into the workshop for Beaches Energy, there's been some structural changes to their capital improvement program. And a big part of that is because of priorities identified through the strategic planning process. The wastewater assessment is looking to be wrapped up in 2021, but we're looking to do water and stormwater right on its heels in 2022. And again, we'll have plans and, if necessary, evaluation of rate structures associated with both. The next 3 slides that you're going to see are pretty much the table of contents for what our intention was to discuss with you at the workshops. While most of the budgets for the departments remain somewhat static year to year, we wanted to make sure that the directors are addressing those changes that have some substance with regards to what they're doing and how it might affect them financially. So the first that you'll see is planning and development. And Ms. Ireland will speak a little bit to weekend code enforcement activities, what we've been doing and what we plan on doing into fiscal year 2022 and how we budgeted for that. We have a brand new position of CRA coordinator. And obviously there's a lot of activities going on with the CRA. You had, I think, a productive meeting last night to help provide guidance and direction to that 5-person board. You'll hear from both Heather and Taylor Mobbs a little bit more about what they've been doing behind the scenes other than just training. And the last is development projects. We are always looking on the horizon for what projects may be ready to break ground within our community. You're aware of a couple of those with Adventure Landing and Beach Marine. And Heather will give you the latest update on those, as well as possibly a couple of the projects that are right around the corner. When we get to public works, you'll hear about programmatic planning model that Director Barron is working on within his department, being a lot more proactive instead of reactive with what we're doing. We're also looking at making a little bit of a change with personnel there in order to create an internal sewer cleaning and line televising crew. He'll talk a little bit about that and tell you what the benefits of going in that direction for our organization will be. We also have a storage structure on the back lot of O&M that we are proposing to replace, as well as asset management in general for the department. Parks and Recreation, Director Fatides will be talking about the Urban Trail System Master Plan. You actually have an item that's on your agenda for next Monday that will give you a precursor of where we're headed with that particular initiative. You'll also hear a little bit about Gonzalez Park proposed improvements, as well as the fact that we have an upcoming council briefing to talk about some concept plans that you may be interested in. The Sunshine Playground replacement will also be a point of discussion, as well as the implementation of the Parks Assessment Study, which this council had worked on over the past year or so. For Human Resources, theirs is a little bit more nebulous, but they are looking at attracting and retaining a qualified and highly motivated workforce. And so our new HR director, Kim Bennett, is going to speak to some of the things she's going to have her staff working on next year to try and achieve this overarching goal for the organization. Finance Department, Director Gossett will walk you through some of what we're doing with the ERP implementation, specifically related to utility billing and the human resources modules. And when we get to Beaches Energy Services, you'll hear from Director Putnam about the strategic plan that they're in the process of wrapping up, regulatory compliance issues that they're facing, especially with a lot of the cybersecurity issues that you may have heard about around the state and the country. And he'll also speak a little bit with regards to industry trends and how those are driving some of the initiatives he's doing within his department. With that being said, that concludes the presentation on the financial position of the city. We do have representatives from the departments on the line, including from finance, who helped put the numbers together for today. Do any of you have any questions with regards to the information that was presented, or any questions in general? And I can't see hands, so let me do the stop the share. And there we go. Councilmember Jansen.
So the streamlining of businesses coming in and doing the one-stop shopping, does that have a financial impact? And when can we see some movement on that as the new year approaches?
That will be something that we have to plan out as to how we're going to do it and what it's going to look like. While it's an element we discussed for the strategic plan, we have not started on it yet. But it's definitely on the radar. I'll need to get with Heather Ireland, the building official, George Knight, the city clerk's office, along with all the other departments. And we'll need to talk about how many processes there are and where we need to start. It can be everything from a site plan review process to filling out paperwork at the clerk's office just to register for a business tax receipt. So there's going to be multiple layers to this, but it will take us a little bit of time just to even get to the starting blocks on it as we still go through the strategic plan and finalizing that document.
Do you see a financial impact with that?
Depending on what we come up for processes, there's always the possibility that we may have to add another staff person if we're looking at something that goes above and beyond what we're currently doing. I know one of the things we talked about was the equivalent of a business ombudsman, someone who could hold the hand of a local business owner and walk them through the process. I don't know if that's something that fits in with a current staff role and responsibility, or would that be another position that we would need to look at? We won't know until we get into those discussions. Based on what you were talking about last night with regards to economic development, there's always a possibility that it might be a new dual role position as well. But we'll have to keep that in the back of our minds as we think about solutions to the problem.
Sure, that's kind of where I was going with that. Adds another incentive for attracting developers.
Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so that will actually conclude our presentation for today. I think what that means is we have council meetings on Monday of next week. And if I pull up my calendar real quick, just as a review for council, next Monday we will have in-person budget review, a budget workshop for executive and legislative, finance and HR, starting at 4 o'clock in person in the council chambers. And upon completion of that, we will have the regular council meeting starting up at 6 o'clock in the council chambers. Any other final comments by council before I close this out? All right. Thank you all for participating in the kickoff of the budget review cycle. We look forward to next Monday and starting to go through each department's budgets. Thank you all and have